I quietly kept my son's entire household running. Then my daughter-in-law decided I was outdated and took over everything. So I stopped helping and left town for the weekend. 2 days later, I turned on my phone and saw 18 desperate notifications waiting for me. The Sunday pot roast had barely settled on the dining table when Lisa pushed her chair back, folded her arms, and cleared her throat. She slid a printed color-coded spreadsheet across the oak surface, stopping it right beside my iced tea. Tommy stared intently at his mashed potatoes, refusing to look up. Lisa's voice carried that sharp corporate edge she used whenever she wanted to reorganize our living arrangement. "We're restructuring how this house runs," Lisa announced without a hint of hesitation. "Tommy and I are taking over every scheduling decision, the grocery budget, the utility accounts, and Toby's after-school routine. You've been managing things your way for years, Sophia, but your methods are outdated. Get used to us making the decisions now." I looked at my 30-year-old son. He adjusted his collar and murmured something vague about modern efficiency. For 12 months since they sold their condo to save for a down payment on a suburban property, I had quietly managed the entire household. I coordinated the contractor visits, cooked every weekday dinner, drove my grandson Toby to speech therapy, and kept our 40-year-old split-level house functioning without a single disruption. Instead of arguing or defending my routines, I carefully wiped my hands on my linen napkin. I looked directly into Lisa's eyes, noting the rigid confidence in her posture. She genuinely believed that running a multi-generational household was simply a matter of downloading a shared mobile calendar and barking orders at service workers. "If you feel strongly that you should lead, Lisa, then the responsibility is entirely yours," I replied softly. I reached into the wooden hutch behind me, pulled out the thick leather binder containing every vendor contact account, password, and therapy schedule, and laid it gently in front of her. Lisa smiled, triumphantly convinced she had won an unspoken battle. She did not realize that control without experience is nothing more than an open invitation to disaster. The transition began on Monday morning, revealing the pattern Lisa had cultivated over the past year. Whenever a minor household hiccup occurred, she treated it as proof that my age was slowing things down. If the lawn care crew arrived during her morning Zoom call, she blamed my scheduling. When the municipal recycling guidelines changed, she claimed I was hoarding unnecessary paper bins. Tommy had learned to stay invisible during these lectures, retreating behind his work laptop. I did not interfere when Lisa immediately canceled my long-standing arrangement with Frank, our neighborhood mechanic and handyman. Frank had maintained our furnace, water heater, and gutters since my late husband Arthur passed away 8 years ago. He knew every strange creak in the floorboards and charged us fair, honest rates because of decades of mutual loyalty. "We're switching to a digital home services subscription app," Lisa declared, while pouring her morning espresso. "It's streamlined, verified, and cheaper. We don't need to pay some retired neighbor when certified technicians are available on demand with the swipe of a finger." I took my morning coffee out to the back patio, leaving the kitchen completely to her. While she busily set up automated apps on her tablet, I opened my personal planner and made 2 private phone calls. I confirmed my registration for a 6-week landscape photography workshop in downtown Chicago and scheduled a long overdue visit to my sister Claire's cabin in Michigan. For years, I had postponed my own travel plans because I felt obligated to keep the domestic machinery humming for my son's growing family. I had prepared Toby's specialized allergy-free lunches, answered the door for delivery drivers, and made sure no bill went unpaid. Lisa believed my presence was merely decorative, a lingering habit of an older woman with nowhere else to go. She was about to discover the sheer volume of invisible work required to keep a quiet life intact. By Wednesday, my daily routine had completely shifted. I no longer woke up at 6 to start the breakfast oatmeal or pack Toby's school bag. Instead, I stayed in my bedroom until 8, reading my favorite historical biographies and enjoying quiet solitude. When I walked downstairs, the kitchen counter was covered in half-spread peanut butter spilled milk and crumpled permission slips that Lisa had neglected to sign before rushing to her car. Tommy hurried past me in the hallway, juggling his briefcase and his dry cleaning. He looked exhausted, bags already darkening beneath his eyes. Mom, did you happen to pick up Toby's inhaler refill from the pharmacy on Elm Street? He asked in a breathless rush. I paused on the stairs, offering him a calm and steady look. No, Tommy. Lisa specifically stated on Sunday that all medical pickups and scheduling now go through her digital calendar. I didn't want to cross her new boundaries. Tommy hesitated, opening his mouth as if to ask me to make an exception, but Lisa's voice echoed sharply from the front porch. She was barking into her Bluetooth headset while trying to wedge Toby's booster seat into her compact sedan. Tommy, let's go. We're going to be late for the quarterly regional review. They peeled out of the driveway in a cloud of exhaust, leaving the garage door wide open. I walked over, pressed the button to close it, and took a deep breath of the crisp autumn air. At noon, I drove my sedan to the community center to meet my friend Martha for lunch and our weekly volunteer shift at the public library. When I returned home at 4, the house was empty and peaceful. I brewed a pot of peppermint tea and started packing my rolling suitcase. Lisa wanted the steering wheel. I had no intention of riding in the passenger seat to pump the brakes for her. Thursday brought the first cracks in Lisa's digital empire. While folding my laundry, I noticed an official yellow envelope taped to our front door. It was a formal notice from the Municipal Water Authority warning of an immediate shutoff due to an unpaid transfer balance. When Lisa took over the utility accounts, she had forgotten that our town requires an in-person signature and deposit when switching billing authorization names. Rather than panicking or rushing down to City Hall to rectify her oversight, I placed the bright yellow envelope squarely in the center of the kitchen island. Beside it, I left a note reminding them that I would be leaving early Friday morning for my 4-day photography workshop and weekend stay in Michigan. When Lisa arrived home that evening, her face was flushed with frustration. The home services app she hired had failed to send a technician to check the strange rumbling in the basement furnace. On top of that, Toby's speech therapist had charged a $50 late cancellation fee because Lisa forgot to update the clinic with their new transportation schedule. She walked into the kitchen, saw the water notice, and threw her car keys onto the counter with an irritated sigh. "Why didn't you just call the water department and pay this over the phone?" "Sophia, you were home all afternoon." I looked up from the novel I was reading at the dining table. "Because you informed me on Sunday that you and Tommy make the decisions regarding utility accounts now. I do not have authorization to alter your billing structure, nor would I want to undermine your leadership." Tommy walked in behind her, looking at the shutoff notice with growing alarm. "Lisa, we need water for the weekend. I have clients visiting our home office on Saturday. I'll handle it online tonight." Lisa snapped defensively, refusing to admit she had overlooked the municipal policy. Friday morning arrived under gray, overcast skies. I loaded my suitcase and camera bag into the trunk of my car while the house was still silent. Before starting the engine, I texted both Tommy and Lisa a brief message wishing them a good weekend and reminding them that my phone would be turned off during my daylight workshop sessions. As I drove north along the interstate, a profound sense of lightness settled over my shoulders. For decades, I had carried the emotional and logistical weight of this family. When my husband Arthur fell ill, I became the bedrock that held everything upright. After he died, I channeled that same protective instinct into Tommy, helping him navigate college, his first job, and eventually his marriage. I had welcomed Lisa into my home with open arms, cooking her favorite meals when she worked late and stepping aside so she could feel comfortable in the shared spaces. Yet over time, my quiet generosity had been reinterpreted as dependency. Lisa viewed my domestic competence not as a gift, but as an outdated habit of an older woman who had nothing better to do than serve them. She believed authority was simply a matter of demanding respect rather than earning it through consistent, thankless effort. She wanted the title of master of the house without wanting to crawl into the dusty utility crawl space or manage the tedious bureaucratic details that kept our lives peaceful. By mid-afternoon, I checked into a charming bed and breakfast near the lake shore. The air smelled of pine needles and damp earth. I spent 3 hours photographing the golden autumn leaves reflecting off the water completely uninterrupted by the chime of school reminders, contractor inquiries, or domestic demands. For the first time in years, my time belonged entirely to me, and I had no desire to surrender it back. Saturday in Michigan was blissfully productive. I learned advanced exposure techniques from a seasoned nature photographer, shared a delightful seafood lunch with my sister Claire, and walked along the wooden boardwalk as the wind whipped across the lake. My phone remained zipped inside my backpack until 5 in the evening, when I finally powered the screen on 18 notifications lit up the display. There were 7 missed calls from Tommy, 4 urgent texts from Lisa, and several automated alerts from our home security system indicating multiple sensor trips around the basement door. I sat on a wooden bench overlooking the marina and listened to Tommy's voicemail. His voice sounded strained, frayed around the edges by rising panic. "Mom, please call us back as soon as you get this." The water is off. The replacement furnace tech from the app refused to touch the boiler because of the vintage piping, and Toby is running a mild fever. Lisa doesn't know where you keep the old plumbing records. I deleted the message without calling back immediately. Instead, I typed a calm, concise text message to their shared family thread. All property records and historical manuals are in the leather binder on the kitchen counter. Since you are managing the household decisions, you will need to contact the emergency utility dispatch directly. I am in the middle of an evening seminar and will check in tomorrow. Claire watched me slide the phone back into my pocket with an approving nod. "You spent 20 years shielding that boy from every rough patch, Sophia. It's about time he realizes that running a life takes work. It's not about punishing them," I replied softly, taking a sip of warm cider. "It's about allowing them to experience the reality of the control they demanded. You cannot learn to steer if someone keeps grabbing the wheel." Sunday morning brought the inevitable peak of Lisa's miscalculations. While I was enjoying a quiet breakfast of blueberry pancakes at the inn, the situation back home collapsed under the weight of poor planning and heavy rain. A seasonal storm had swept through the suburb, dropping 2 inches of water in 3 hours. Without Frank's regular autumn gutter cleaning, which Lisa had canceled as an unnecessary expense, the roof runoff overflowed directly into the basement window wells. Compounding the disaster, the cheap gig economy technician Lisa hired to inspect the furnace had accidentally loosened the pressure relief valve on the backup sump pump before leaving on Friday. By 9 in the morning, 2 inches of murky rainwater had pooled across the finished basement floor, soaking Tommy's home office rug and threatening their stored furniture. To make matters worse, the municipal water remained shut off, meaning they had no running water to clean up the mess or flush the toilets with a sick 5-year-old in the house. Lisa had spent 4 hours on hold with automated customer support lines, only to be told that emergency weekend dispatch rates would cost $800 up front just for a technician to knock on the door. None of her modern smartphone apps offered an immediate solution for an overflowing basement in the middle of a torrential downpour. Tommy had finally snapped. For the first time since their marriage, he stopped deferring to Lisa's spreadsheets. He found Frank's old business card tucked behind the refrigerator magnet. But when he called, Frank politely informed him that since Lisa had formally terminated their 30-year family account on Monday, he had booked other jobs for the entire weekend. The digital shortcuts Lisa championed had completely severed the human safety net that kept our home secure. At 2 in the afternoon, my phone rang again. This time, I answered. Lisa's voice was completely stripped of its usual corporate polish. Her tone trembled, punctuated by the faint sound of a wet, dry vacuum running in the background, and Toby crying softly in the living room. "Sophia, please," Lisa stammered, dropping all pretense of authority. "We made a terrible mistake. The basement is taking on water the heat won't turn on, and the city won't restore the water main until Monday morning unless we have the original deed verification number from your safe. The app technicians aren't showing up, and Frank won't take Tommy's calls. We don't know what to do." "Please," she begged. "Come home and fix everything." I listened quietly, letting the silence stretch just long enough for the gravity of her words to sink in. I did not raise my voice, nor did I offer a single word of spiteful satisfaction. "Lisa, I am 3 hours away in Michigan, I said evenly. I will not speed through a rainstorm to clean up a crisis created by your impatience and arrogance. Tommy is 30 years old. He knows where the main shutoff valve is in the crawl space. You wanted to make the decisions, which means you must now make the emergency calls and pay the emergency fees. We can't afford the weekend emergency rates on top of the water penalty, Lisa whispered, her voice breaking. Then you will have to use the savings you set aside for your new house, I replied calmly. I will return tomorrow at noon exactly as scheduled. I expect the water to be extracted and my home secured before I walk through that front door. I ended the call, turned my phone on silent, and went for a peaceful walk along the shoreline. When I pulled into my driveway on Monday at precisely 12 o'clock, the scene was subdued. A commercial water restoration van was parked on the street, its yellow suction hoses snaking through the basement window. Tommy was sitting on the front porch steps, his clothes stained with soot and damp drywall dust, looking utterly defeated. Lisa stood by the kitchen island surrounded by stacks of paper receipts, damp towels, and an invoice from the restoration company totaling nearly $3,000. The house smelled faintly of wet concrete and industrial disinfectant, but the furnace was humming softly. Tommy had managed to find a local emergency plumber willing to restore the valve for a hefty weekend fee. As I walked through the door carrying my overnight bag, both of them looked up. Neither spoke for a long moment. The rigid, condescending posture Lisa had carried for months was entirely gone. The water is back on, Tommy said quietly, his voice raspy. And the basement is being dried out with commercial dehumidifiers. We paid the invoice from our joint savings. I set my keys on the counter right beside the leather binder Lisa had taken on Sunday. Good. That is what responsible homeowners do when an emergency occurs. Lisa looked down at her hands, her eyes red-rimmed. I'm sorry, Sophia. I thought managing this place was just about logistics and budgets. I didn't understand how much you were protecting us from or how much work went into keeping this family running. I had no right to talk to you the way I did. You didn't just disrespect me, Lisa, I said firmly, maintaining clear eye contact. You disrespected the labor, the history, and the relationships that hold this roof over your head. You wanted control without understanding the cost. Now you know what it costs. We sat down at the dining table that evening, but the dynamic had permanently changed. I did not reclaim the binder, nor did I offer to return to our old arrangement. Instead, I laid out a new formal framework for our living situation. Moving forward, things will be different, I stated calmly. Tommy and Lisa, you will contribute a fixed monthly amount toward the household operating fund, covering 30% of the utilities, property insurance, and regular maintenance. You will be responsible for your own laundry, your own grocery shopping, and Toby's transportation schedule. Lisa nodded quickly, without a single objection. Tommy reached over and signed the agreement I had drafted that morning. As for me, I continued, I will no longer be the on-call housekeeper or the default backup plan. I have enrolled in an advanced photography course that meets 3 evenings a week, and I will be spending 2 weekends a month traveling or visiting Claire. My time is mine to spend. Over the following months, the atmosphere in the house transformed. Lisa stopped treating our home like an office to be restructured and began treating it like a shared sanctuary. She learned Frank's name, spoke to our neighbors with genuine warmth, and took real responsibility for the domestic duties she had once dismissed as trivial. Tommy grew more attentive, stepping up to handle yard maintenance and household repairs, alongside Frank, rather than hiding behind his computer screen. They began looking at modest starter homes within their actual budget, recognizing that true independence required financial discipline rather than performative control. I woke up every morning to a peaceful room, brewed my coffee in a clean kitchen, and pursued the passions I had set aside for far too long. I had given Lisa the control she demanded, and in doing so, I reclaimed the freedom I had earned.